Hello, everybody, and happy Thursday. Welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. I am John Schmeelk, joined by my guy, Lance Medow. Lance, what's up, buddy?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good to be hosted with you, my friend.
Absolutely.
Always a pleasure. We're taking your calls at 201-939-4513. So Lance has been on a couple of shows with Paulie Dots. We've had a couple specific shows, though. One was on the Senior Bowl. The other one, I think you guys did the Giants quarterback situation or third pick in the draft, something like that. So we haven't really gotten Lance's take on kind of where the Giants are, what his offseason blueprint is. You've kind of heard where I think we are in terms of those situations. So I want to get Lance's take. See how, if you were the Giants, he would approach this offseason. I'm going to try to pick it apart. I'll pepper him with some questions, and we'll see if we can get to a fun conclusion. Lance, so let's level set. Where do you see the Giants are here heading into an offseason, coming off a disappointing 3-win season, which obviously did not go the way they want, or go the way they wanted it to go. Third pick in the draft. They retain Joe Schoen and Brian Dable. How do you think the Giants should approach this offseason with kind of where they're standing right now?
Well, clearly the quarterback position is the biggest priority, John, and I know maybe that's stating the obvious, but I don't think we can emphasize it enough because here's the thing. It's not just about who the starting quarterback is going to be. It's really the entire room that has to be revamped. You have to have an insurance policy, as you always do, I think, for any team. Plus, if you do draft a quarterback at 3, well, then you need to bring in a seasoned veteran that could very well be the starter day one if you're not ready to hand over the reins to whoever you select with the 3rd overall pick. So that's A, that's B, that's C, and then any other letter of the alphabet that you want to add to the list. And once again, we could sit here and we could dissect other needs and other positions, and I wouldn't dispute that. But the quarterback position is of utmost importance this offseason for the general manager, Joe Schoen, as well as Brian Dable. And here's the other thing that I think even the Giants front office needs to take into consideration. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, John, but obviously John Mara spoke a few weeks ago, and he was asked about whether or not there's pressure for Joe Schoen and Brian Dable, right? And what he would want to see this upcoming season. And clearly you want the team to be competitive. You want the team to have a better record. But here's the other caveat that I think is important to bring up. If you draft a quarterback with the 3rd overall pick, you also need to have a bit of the patient mindset, because I want to speculate a little bit. We don't know what's going to happen beyond this season, but when you bring in a rookie quarterback, John, it's possible the guy's going to struggle. It's possible there's going to be ups and downs if you play that quarterback.
Not everyone is Jaden Daniels
100%.
or C.J. Stroud.
Well, plus,
look at Bryce Young, look at Caleb Williams, look at Drake May. Just go down the list.
It fluctuates.
Yes,
yeah, and you have to take into consideration the question marks around the quarterback. Remember, we're just focusing on one facet of the team. So if you then go through a bit of a bumpy road, which is understandable, it's not crazy, you have to then ask yourself, what's best then for that rookie quarterback that just came off his first campaign, depending on how long or how much he plays? Is it, well, let's now bring in a new coach and a new scheme and a new voice, which we've seen how many times go wrong or a bad direction across the NFL landscape?
Kyler Murray has had a million coordinators. The Bears just did it with Caleb Williams.
Exactly,
just 100%. And the Patriots just did it with Drake May.
Sure. Or do you say, okay, maybe the record isn't glowing, maybe the numbers didn't blow you away or go through the roof, but there was a bit of a foundation established to say, okay, there's something to work with, and if the quarterback is the most important position, I don't think anybody would dispute that. I'm sure people in the front office, the coaching staff, then you have to do what's right for that position. And I hate, you know my mindset. It's not the quarterback on an island. You and I have had a lot of conversations. I think we're in alignment there.
A team's record is not a quarterback stat, exactly.
But I feel as if what's distinct about this offseason, John, and the approach of evaluating the season of 2025 in totality is what is best for that quarterback, assuming you take him with the 3rd overall pick.
You're absolutely right.
So,
if you're going to invest the 3rd pick in a quarterback, your entire focus should be putting the best infrastructure around him so that he is successful. Don't do to that quarterback what you did to Daniel Jones in his first 3 years, changing things left and right.
Yeah. That's my big picture
I'm with
blueprint,
you on that.
just to answer where you think I think they should be headed and how I think at least they should approach it from, once again, the big picture
Do you think
spectrum.
they should draft a quarterback at 3rd overall?
I think that when you pick this high, you cannot guarantee that you're going to be this high again, regardless of your aspirations and your dreams of grandeur. And if you're going to utilize the 3rd overall pick on a player and you're not going to take a quarterback, then, John, that player better do things that we may have never seen in NFL history. Now, Travis Hunter makes it difficult because, and you and I have had conversations off the air with respect to, because of his versatility and the fact that he plays 2 positions in college, you almost have a salvageable mechanism in place.
If
God
he fails
forbid,
in one, he can go to the other.
It doesn't go in the right direction. So that is attractive. But short of Travis Hunter, you could tell me all you want about a nose tackle or a defensive lineman.
I would say a pass rusher like Abdul Carter. You could make an argument a top 5 awesome pass rusher. We've seen, the Nick Bosa's of the world, the Myles Garrett's of the world. Those guys have impacted teams a lot.
Does, though, it move the needle enough within this team, okay? Don't look at it in terms of what Micah Parsons has done for the Cowboys and Bosa for the Niners. Look at it, if you bring another pass rusher in and you put him with Dexter Lawrence and anybody else you want to pinpoint, does that move the direction of this team into a splash mode within the span of a season? Or does it make sense to then go after a position of need and somebody that may not make the splash immediately, but in the long run has more substance and value? Okay. I would lean towards the latter more so than the former.
All right, we are oddly almost exactly on the same page when it comes to that. I agree with you, and I'll just add this to the quarterback, and I've said this to our listeners a bunch. I don't think I've said it to you yet. If you draft a quarterback at 3, and after a year you're like, just pick one next year. If you're picking high again and another guy's sitting there, just do what the Cardinals did with Josh Rosen and Kyler Murray. Yeah. And that's fine. Did anybody...
Now, a different coaching staff, of course, came in.
Correct.
But still.
Either way. Do you think anyone in Arizona cares right now that they decided to trade Josh Rosen for whatever they traded him for? Nobody cares. They got the quarterback that they think is going to lead them franchise. And look, we'll see what Kyler Murray does.
Steve Wilkes may beg to differ, but that's a whole other story.
He might care. That's true.
He's not with the franchise, though, anymore.
Yes, correct. Steve Wilkes might care. But I think that's... To your point, when you're picking 3rd and you don't have to trade assets to move up to pick the quarterback, it allows you to move on quicker if you want to, right? It's not like the Panthers who trade 1 million picks for Bryce Young. They don't have a first-round pick the next year, right? Which is why I would not, my red line here is that I would not trade a future one to move up in this draft to pick a quarterback. That's my red line. I'm not doing that.
I don't think they're going to have the flexibility to do that because I think the 2 teams ahead don't have interest in giving that up. That's just my opinion as it stands right now. A lot could change,
honestly,
of course.
I don't have a good feel for what they're going to do. I think that'll be interesting. Okay, let's stick with the quarterback before we get to the other positions real fast. Are we both in agreement you have to leave, since you don't know what's going to happen in the draft, right? You have to leave free agency with a quarterback you feel comfortable starting week
without
1,
a
correct?
doubt.
Okay.
That has to be, I would say that's actually because of the order, that has to be the first thing before we even entertain the draft.
Totally agree. Who of the quarterbacks that we know are free agents or the ones that we know could either be traded or become free agents? And again, we're talking hypothetically here. We're not linking any players that are other teams' property to the Giants, to be clear. What quarterbacks would you put in that category where you would feel good next year to be walking in week 1 as the Giants starting quarterback? I'm going to throw a couple names at you. I want you, as you look at your list, you can say yes or no, okay? I'll go first with the guy that's been rumored about a potential trade. Matthew Stafford.
Well, that I would be all in for.
Would you trade a first-round pick for him?
Where he's at in his career, though?
Because that's what the Rams are going to want.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'd love the idea of a first-round pick. See, here's what I would love. If you were to tell me you're going to get a quarterback you like at 3, I would be willing to risk it. But if you then give up the asset for Stafford, who once again has a lot in the tank.
I don't think you could give up the first. I don't think you can give up 3rd overall. I think it would have to be the one next year.
Well, no, that's I guess what I'm saying. But once again, Stafford can't be the plan on an island. You still need to go younger at that position.
He's 37
John.
years old.
Yeah, I mean, you can't bank on him
100%.
being able to hold up for X amount of years.
Which is why I don't think that's going to work. I think with the trade, with the amount you're going to have to give up to get him.
If it was a younger guy, I'd be a little bit more in tune.
100%. I'm with you. Okay, so that's one. The other guy that is currently, again, we're not linking the Giants to Stafford.
Just speculation.
The guy that's been reported that's out there. Number 2, and this has been based on reports that are out there, there's a possibility the Falcons might try to move on from Kirk Cousins. If it's a trade, you have to pick up a pretty big salary. If they just release him, again, I don't know if the other team's going to want to trade for him given his base salary. You could probably get him for very cheap because he'll be getting paid $27 million from the Falcons this year.
Like the Russell Wilson situation in Denver. Yeah.
What do you think about Kirk?
Yeah, Kirk, when I had conversations with Paul Dottino on a previous show, Kirk was one of the names I threw out. I think realistically, he will hit free agency, John. I find it hard to believe that a team is going to be willing to give up and take on what he has left. I mean, granted, it only takes one, but I think there's a chance. I'd be willing to roll the dice that it's possible he does reach free agency.
It could also be a deal, too, where the Falcons pick up half of it, and the other team picks up half.
That makes it even more
something
attractive,
like that. So maybe it would be a trade. They get a pick back, and the other team is maybe they're on the hook for $10 million instead of $25, right? Something like that.
But you know what? That does make a difference.
No, it does. So, and that then impacts your cap. Because I think the key with these veteran quarterbacks, the Giants have so many other places and same thing with Stafford and the money too, right? The Giants have so much money or so many other holes that they need to fill with free agency money. If you put all that free agency money into the quarterback position, you're not going to be able to build a roster elsewhere. So I think that's a problem too.
The problem is, though, just real quick, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please.
If you are going in the direction though of a rookie quarterback and you want to be more competitive at least and have your record improve, you have to be willing, John, to sacrifice more money towards that position. I understand it hurts you elsewhere, but you can't have everything in the National Football League.
Totally get where you come from. Okay, now why don't you go through some of the free agent quarterbacks and see which guys you would be willing to say, all right, week 1, you're my starter.
Well, Kirk is in the conversation.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Then the other guy that is in the conversation, but he's going to cost a lot more, is Sam Darnold.
Yeah,
because, I mean, Darnold...
too expensive, I think.
He'll make you competitive, but here's the other thing that I worry about Sam. Sam is coming from a really good environment, okay? And that's putting it politely, okay? So you take Sam and you now put him elsewhere. You got to now be a little bit realistic, okay?
And back in New York where there might be some psychological stuff going on.
Anything's possible. But the bottom line is, we have seen Darnold go to the Jets. We saw him go to the Panthers. Now he went to the Vikings. Okay, well, why did it click? Why did it work? Well, you give him Justin Jefferson. You give him Jordan Addison. You give him T.J. Hawkinson. You give him an offensive line. You give him a run game. You give him Kevin O'Connell. I don't know, John. That may just a tad have a level of impact that Carolina and the Jets didn't provide. So all of that, I'd have to weigh.
I'm with you.
Versus how good of a season he had.
I would assume he's getting at least $30 million a year. He would be in the Baker neighborhood.
Well, that's doubling his salary from this past season.
I think he would be in the Baker, Geno Smith neighborhood, which I think is fair, by the way.
The thing with Baker, though, and you know I'm high on Baker. I don't need to tell you. And I'm very happy just privately that it's paid off because I, once again, was high of him coming out of the draft.
And I'm very happy for Darnold, too, because I was very high on him coming out of the draft.
So without a doubt. But I guess the reason why I feel a little bit more comfortable with Baker is the environment's changed for Baker. Even in Tampa over the last 2 seasons with 2 different coordinators, he's proven that. Darnold hasn't proven.
He's only done it in one place for 1 year.
The one season. So there's a little bit of skepticism in me with Sam.
No, that's fair.
Versus if you were to run the table with Baker, not that he's going to be available anyway.
I think that's a good point. All right, how about, would you be okay with Russell Wilson?
I would be okay with Russell Wilson as well, though something tells me if Pittsburgh gives him a realistic shot to stay on, I think based on the environment, he's going to stick it out there.
Las Vegas is also an interesting landing
to
spot.
Reunite with Pete Carroll.
And I'm sure Tom Brady has a ton of respect for Russell Wilson as well. And you want to you're trying to build a culture there, right? That's why you hire Pete Carroll. That's a guy that you helped build a culture with.
Well, you could tell Tom is going after proven commodities, okay?
Yes.
Tom's not in the business of, I'm going to give the sexy coordinator a shot to prove what he can do. No, we're bringing in, the man that brought stability in Super Bowl appearances and victories in Seattle, which I love, by the way. I thought that was a slam dunk by the Raiders.
I thought it was a good hire, too.
I thought other teams should have went aggressively after Pete Carroll.
All right, how about
we'll save that for a rainy day.
Justin Fields.
Even though today is a rainy day.
Yes, Justin Fields.
Justin Fields, I would put below Russell Wilson, but a little bit maybe above Sam Darnold because the athleticism intrigues me.
But age. I would say ahead of Darnold because of the price, simply. Right?
Correct. Yes, that would be the other factor. Yes. The athleticism, not a lot of wear and tear because he hasn't played as much, and the fact that I'm not saying these other guys are not hungry, but I think there is a fire in Justin Fields.
I agree.
Because he didn't get the opportunity to pan out in Pittsburgh. Remember, he was the starter at the beginning of the season. Russ had the calf injury, and then Pittsburgh and Mike Tomlin said, all right, Justin, we think we could get the upgrade, so you move over. So that adds a little bit of layer of intrigue. I think the money and the athleticism, I think there's a little bit less risk than Darnold, so that's why I would put him ahead of Sam. I'd put Russ, Fields, Darnold, and then, Kirk is the dangling thing that's out there, but we got to wait and see money and flexibility with him.
I think that's where my list ends. Would you put anyone else on your list?
Well, I brought up the free agent list just because visually I like to see it. And I've talked about a lot of these quarterbacks. You're taking a roll of the dice. Trey Lance, Zach Wilson. No, it's not worth it. I don't think you're moving yourself forward with respect to that. Jacoby Brissett, we know who Jacoby Brissett is. He's a one-year veteran.
He just lost the job in New England, right?
Yeah.
They literally just tried to do that with him in New England, and it didn't work.
The only other name that we didn't mention that I would consider is Andy Dalton.
He's a little old.
He is.
He's getting there.
Well, listen, you want to trade for Matthew Stafford.
I know.
Andy's not going to cost you a first-round pick.
That is true.
And here's the other thing. Andy has a lot of experience being in the same QB room as a quarterback that was just drafted.
No, that's a good point.
So he knows what he's getting into. You're not asking for too much. So Andy, I would absolutely consider. Jameis Winston, I know, is out there, but listen, as much as Jameis is entertaining and licking his fingers and giving a dissertation, it's too many turnovers. It's not worth it. And then I've heard Marcus Mariota has been thrown out too, but Marcus is like Jacoby Brissett at this point.
Very similar, I agree.
I mean, are you really raising the ante? Are you giving yourself more upside?
Remember, he isn't like a young improving quarterback anymore. He's he is what he is. He's a 31-year-old
vet. Insurance policy backup.
He's a backup.
That's it.
But he's not a guy I think I want to roll into as a starter in week 1. Again, we saw the Falcons try that 2 years ago, right? The Falcons and Mariota, and then they ended up giving they dropped top to Ritter afterwards. So they tried it with him, and frankly, it didn't work. So, I'm with you. I mean, it makes it tough. It's a narrow needle to thread, and the Giants are going to try to figure out a way to do it, and we'll see how that, once we get to free agency and we see what happens with maybe some of these older quarterbacks, if they get cut loose or not, if they get traded, we'll see what direction they might end up going. All right, aside from the quarterback, Lance, where would you want to go in terms of positions of greatest need that you would want to address in level of priority, and kind of how much of your resource pool would you want to use on addressing these specific spots?
Well, I think the secondary needs to be addressed, John. I mean, that's the position as I was looking over free agency and the roster. Dory Jackson is a scheduled free agent. So is Jason Pinnock. Okay, so those are your two veterans. Now, you've got young guys that you drafted, but like we saw this past season, it's a bit of a roller coaster. So I don't know if you need to go out and spend an immense amount of money, but I think there's room for them to add one or two veteran free agents, one perhaps at safety or a guy that could play both positions, and I think it's a necessity because what happens if some of these young guys who it doesn't look like you're going to part ways with, but a Deonte Banks or a Cordell Flott.
By the way, Cordell Flott's on the last year of his rookie deal, too.
Even more of a reason why you need to look at other options.
You're not just, as we always say, Lance, you're not just drafting for this year. You're drafting for the future, too.
So the more and more I look at the secondary, I would really put that, John, probably right after quarterback. And I'm not going to say corner versus safety because, as I just mentioned, there's needs at both. So the secondary unit is number 2 on my list in terms of game plan for structuring this roster.
I would say defensive tackle would be a close second to me. If
that's fair.
Not, I could argue first, to be honest with you, just to try to finally shore up the run defense, which has been a continual problem. The depth behind Dexter Lawrence is something that they've tried to figure out. Nacho will still be here next year, but behind that, Elijah Chapman is a young guy, but you don't have much depth beyond that. I actually thought Elijah Garcia played pretty well today when he finally had the chance at the end of the year. I think he's a guy that could stick around, to be honest with you. But again, I think you want to try to bring in another defensive tackle. Remember, they talked about it on Hard Knocks last year. They thought about bringing in Christian Wilkins if they couldn't make the deal with Brian Burns go. So try to find that pass rushing 3 technique you could put next to Dexter Lawrence that can kind of solidify that defensive front. And I think we've seen that Joe Shane wants to build through the trenches. That's been his goal, right? He's sacrificed people at other positions. We don't need to go down that road again to try to focus on using your resources, which, by the way, I think when you're building a team, it is actually the right way to do it, all jokes aside, to build the defensive line and to an extent the offensive line. So I would put defensive tackle as kind of the next in that group. And I think that's probably something you do in the draft because I think that can get very expensive in free agency. While a safety in free agency, that's not that expensive. And I would want to add, I think, if you're going to add a veteran piece, Lance, I think the secondaries you want to add the veteran pieces to complement the Tyler Newbins, the Drew Phillips, the Deonte Banks, who are all young. Cordell Flott, still young. Dane Belton, still young. I think it's good to have a veteran in that group to help that group along, whether it's a corner or safety or both. I would be okay adding a younger defensive tackle into the mix in the draft rather than spending on one in free agency. Now, maybe you add like a run-stuffing defensive tackle in free agency the way they did with Ashawn Robinson 2 years ago, because that's not super prohibitive. And then maybe you draft more of a guy that you can become more of a pass rusher in the draft. The problem is that a lot of times these defensive tackles do take a couple years to kind of get rolling a little bit in the league. That's just the way it goes. It's not always that way sometimes, but that would be kind of like my next thing in the order of importance there.
Well, I was going to go defensive line was going to be third on my list to round out the group. And I agree with you. I think because of the resources you have tied up with Dexter Lawrence, I don't know if you can afford to make a big splash at that same position.
By the way,
I think that
Brian
would be
Burns.
a luxury.
And Brian Burns.
Yeah,
too,
Brian
both
Burns.
of them.
Sure, if you want to group everything
those
together.
Those are your two highest paid players on your roster.
So I like your thinking. I think it can be done in piecemeal. Where you bring in a run stopper, you bring in a guy that perhaps can specialize in collapsing the pocket, getting after the quarterback. You can accomplish that through the draft. You could bring in a free agent. You could bring in a guy that maybe came off his rookie contract, showed some flashes, but needed a new environment, needed more reps. I mean, there's ways to put that together, but I think if anything was exposed this season, it was the fact that you can't bank on Dexter doing everything and putting on the cape because what happens? Now you removed him from the equation and you became susceptible.
And these good teams have waves and waves of defensive linemen you could bring in the game. All right, so that was 3. What would be 2 for you then? Oh no, wait. Quarterback was corner was 2 and defensive tackle was 3.
Yeah. So those are the top 3.
Any other positions jump out at you?
Well, if we're going to go down the road of what we learned from Dexter Lawrence, I mean, we've been talking about the offensive line till we're blue in the face. I don't think, based on what they did, that they need to go out and make one big investment after another. But what I found interesting is, and I talked about this a lot, you could bring in new offensive linemen, John. You can't think that, this is going to be the year they're all going to stay healthy for all 17 games.
Yep,
that was a lot of the thought process, I think, by many people that were analyzing the Giants. This is fantastic. Andrew Thomas is back. You bring in some new faces. Everybody's going to be playing next to one another for 17 games.
And by the way, it worked for like the first 6, and it looked great.
Sure. But then,
yes.
When you do
the math, reality sets in.
Yeah, and I was looking through before the show, Illuminor. Okay, he missed 2 games. Then
also on the going into the last year of his contract, by the way, just to note.
Andrew Thomas missed 11. Okay, that was the most significant injury. Then you had John Michael Schmitz missed 2.
And Runyon missed, 4 at the end of the year?
And Runyon missed 4.
Yeah.
Okay? So Greg Van Roden, who's a free agent, is the only guy that held up.
And I would still want to bring him back if you can get him back in a reasonable salary. But yeah, I'm with you. I think you have to, Lance, draft an offensive lineman every year. I would always draft an offensive lineman, try to develop one. You never stop building the offensive line. If you draft well at that position, you can get starters in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, especially a guard. You can find 3rd and 4th round guards that start in the league every year.
Sure.
That's how I would approach that. Pick another interior lineman. If you see a tackle even like in round 2 that you feel good about, I do think you need a good backup tackle. Even if that turns into, you draft a tackle and then Illuminor becomes that after he starts at guard, but then he's your backup tackle. Like that type of rotation thing. But I'm with you. I think you just need to add to the depth there. I know a lot of Giant fans have talked about Trey Smith. That's going to be a $20 million plus a year investment. The same way on the defensive line, Milton Williams from the Eagles is going to be a $20+ million a year investment. That's just the way it is with the demand and the scarcity of the free agent market. So for me on the offensive line, especially in sidelines, I think you just keep drafting, and I think you figure it out from there.
Yeah, I think every team, if we had conversations with GMs across the league, they would tell you, you don't go into a season thinking 5 offensive linemen. You think you really need 8 to 9 guys. And I know that's pretty much naming perhaps the entire depth chart that you're keeping active on the 53.
I think you have to feel good about 7 guys. You have to feel
at
good
least bare
about
minimum
7. Yeah.
Because those 2 other guys are going to play.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to start minimum probably 2 to 3 games.
Yeah,
apiece.
100%. Because remember, because you have one guy that's going to sub for the 3 interiors, and you have one guy that's going to sub for the 2 tackles. So
yeah. And there's going to be another guy that you look at the Lions with all the extra offensive linemen that they utilize that are going to be regular pseudo starters where you really become a unit where there's 6 guys that you're relying on a daily basis. But I like what you're singing in terms of the tune, and I think all the Giants need to do is look within the division. Howie Roseman and the Eagles have had the philosophy of consistently drafting offensive linemen. And here's a team where in the conference championship game, okay, they've got injuries to Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens, and guys are coming in and out, and you don't know if they're going to hold up for a half. And I understand Washington turned the ball over like crazy, but they found a way to win, even though there would have been an easy excuse at the most important critical position of the offensive line, the center position, for things to drastically get screwed up. So if other teams can keep their head above water and even get to the degree of flourishing, there's no reason why the Giants can't find a way to improve positions 6, 7, and 8, where I'm not telling you got to have a Pro Bowler, John. I'm just telling you got to have enough volume and option so that we're not sitting here in the season saying, oh, well, these two offensive line went down. What are you going to do?
All right, so before we get to the calls, anything else you want to note about this offseason in terms of process, priorities, anything like that that you think is outwardly important before we get to the calls here?
I mean, I think we covered pretty much every key aspect, big picture. And the only thing that I would throw in is I think special teams overall is something that I would not sleep on just because of the injuries that they went through. Return options. Are you going to give some of the younger guys an opportunity? Do you want to go out in free agency and entertain somebody in that department? That's an area that I think was a bit of a roller coaster this season. There was some good, there was some bad, and there was a lot of in between. And I understand there were injuries to the specialist, and that's hard to control, John, but coverage too. And there were some plays that even were penalized that were brought back that could have went dramatically different. So that's got to be kept in the back of Joe Shane's mind and Brian Dable as they're adding, and especially if they do make a hefty investment in the quarterback. The guys we're talking about, if you're going to bring in extra defensive linemen, you're going to bring in a safety, you're going to bring in a corner, I would say how much special teams experience have they had and what value do they add? That can't just be dismissed in a conversation where, you know, this team needs a push in the tush just about everywhere we're talking about.
All right, folks, go check out the John Settle podcast. Most recent episode, I interviewed Jordan Reed, one of the great draft analysts over at ESPN. We covered everything that happened at the All-Star games and got his latest intel on what he thinks might happen at the top of the draft, which I do think, especially with the Myles Garrett thing going on right now, is pretty much up in the air. Who knows how the Browns are going to approach that. Titans have a new front office. So all of that, go check it out. It's on your favorite podcast platform, Giants.com/podcast, or just go to the Giants app and you can check all of that out. Just search for Giants Huddle Podcast or Giants Podcast Network, and you can find it wherever you get your podcast. All right, 201-939-4513. We got some news today. Is this from today? Pearson, you little look at down there. Virginia Hallis McCaskey passed away today. She was 102. So she was the matriarch of the ownership group for the Chicago Bears. So obviously we wish her family the best in their time of loss.
And that's one of the old school families of professional football.
Very similar to the Mara family in terms of how long they've owned the team.
No doubt.
And the Rooneys and in terms of being NFL royalty. No question about it. All right. Kyle in New Hampshire's first. Pearson, he was on the longest. All right, then we'll get to Hugo, then Jeff. Kyle, what's going on?
Hey, how you guys doing today?
We're good, man. What's up?
All right.
First time calling, so I want to thank you guys for taking the call.
Oh, thanks for calling, Kyle. What do you got?
I don't want to bring up past things, but I've never really heard anyone put it in this perspective before, so I want to kind of touch base on it. So I am a 28-year-old Giants fan who's grown up in New England my whole life, seen that dynasty. I have custom Giants polos at work, if that tells you how much I am for this.
All right.
So a lot of the times people don't get why people in my age group we're so in love with Daniel Jones. I get in arguments all the time with people in their 30s or 40s. A big thing for someone like me, Daniel Jones was the only other quarterback we knew besides Eli Manning. I grew up only knowing Eli Manning. He's one of the few people who started every single game. You knew what you were getting week in and week out with him. He always gave 100%. So when we got Daniel Jones, it was kind of like the passing of the torch. And for someone like me, that's the only second quarterback I've ever seen.
Sure.
So a lot of people just don't really get why we had an allegiance to him. But for people in their mid-20s or something who were old enough to see the two Super Bowls, but not old enough to see the Kurt Warners and the Kerry Collins of the world, really appreciated him on a different level. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there, first of all. And then second of all, just to kind of piggyback off of that, a lot of the times people at work will kind of poke fun at me for being a Giants fan living in New England. And I always make this one comment. It's a lot easier to go through the teams that have been more successful than it is the teams that have been less successful than us. You can go through the world of the Browns of the world, the Lions. Yes, they may be good now or trending to better than we are, but historically they haven't. One of my best friends is a Niners fan in the same age group as me. He's seen his team make 3 Super Bowls and how many NFC championships, and they lose every single one of them. So it's kind of one of those, I know it's hard now. I know it's been hard for a while, but when you put it into perspective like that, we really do have it, I don't want to say good, but historically, we should still be a proud fan base and a proud franchise.
And I'll say this too. These lean years and the pain of these lean years will make the good years when they come all the more sweeter, right? And I think,
absolutely.
This is something besides the Giants, I experienced this with the Knicks, who, as Lance loved to point out to me, were just a running joke of a franchise for the span of 15 years. I mean, more than that, almost 20 years. Like, they were terrible.
21, actually, last weekend. But anyway,
thank
continue,
you.
Yes.
They were terrible. And now, look, they're the 3rd seed in the East, so they're going to win an NBA title. Probably not. Maybe they'll get to an Eastern Conference final. They might not. They might lose in the second round to the Celtics. Who knows?
Yeah.
But this is fun. Like, this is great. Like, I know you want to win the title. You still do. That's still the goal. But enjoying the good stuff now is made even sweeter because of all the garbage, frankly, that I had to watch for the span of 20 years after they lost Patrick Ewing. So this builds character to me. As a fan, does it stink while you're going through it? Yes. Is it awful? Yes. Should you be angry and upset and want things to get better? Yes. All those things, yes. And that's how I'd kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, no, but I appreciate it. And like I said, I just kind of wanted to touch base because I haven't really heard a lot of Giants fans in my age group express why they were so willing to die on the Daniel Jones sword. So it's like, I'm not going to get into the whole, well, we chose him over Barkley and things like that, because that's not how I see it. But when it just comes to Daniel Jones as a person, I just believe that the opinion was kind of misconstrued at different points. But thank you guys for what you do. Thank you guys for talking to me.
Thank you, Kyle.
I appreciate everything.
Yep. Appreciate it. Yeah, and I see that on social media all the time. The Giants chose Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley. That's not what happened.
No, not at all.
They tried to sign Saquon Barkley long-term. They offered him, according to the majority of reports, the same, if not a slightly better contract that the Eagles offered him before they franchised him in 2023, and they were going to then franchise Daniel, and Saquon didn't want to sign the deal for whatever reason, and you had to figure out a way to retain both of them. You couldn't franchise both of them, so then they had to work out the deal with Daniel, where they'll give him an out after 2 years, which ended up, well, we would bet they're going to, well, no, they did because he technically got released. So that they basically utilized with the contract, and it didn't work out with Saquon. It is what it is, but it wasn't, guys, Joe Shane cares. Like, guys, how many times do we talk about Joe Shane with positional value? Like, he cares about that stuff. Like, deep down, like, that's his thing. Like, he gets it. And the Giants, in the position that they're in a rebuilding situation, the position value is not there at running back. We saw it. When we need a bad team around them, how much did Saquon Barkley move the needle for the Giants? Not that much. Look at their record with him. And as I've said from the beginning.
Same thing with Odell Beckham, too, you could bring up.
Same deal.
Yeah.
Great player individually, did not move the needle, okay? The running backs have the biggest impact when they have a great ecosystem around them. So,
which we saw this season with Philadelphia.
Right.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley is the same player he was with the Giants. He impacted that team 5 times more, 10 times more than he did the Giants because of the offensive line in front of him, because of the quarterback behind center, because of the way Jeff Statland designs the run game, because of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert as weapons so you can't stack the box. It's all that together. It made sense for the Giants, in my opinion, with where they were, not to pay a running back big money. It made all the sense in the world for the Eagles, who were in a different position as a franchise, to pay him. And it made sense for Saquon to win a Super Bowl and to, again, be a more impactful player to go play for the Eagles. It made sense for everybody involved what happened. Does that make it any easier for Giant fans? Does it make it any happier for you guys? No, and I get all that. But that's how I kind of described it at the time, and I don't think anyone's surprised that Saquon Barkley had a great year for the Eagles based on the situation he was going into.
No,
none of us did. It is what it is.
Well, we've been talking about how, at least I've been saying it, he was an offensive weapon. He wasn't a conventional running back, but still, you need the environment around you. It's no different. If you took Christian McCaffrey and you put him behind a really bad offensive line, he's going to have limited impact.
And a quarterback that other teams are not going to respect.
Yeah, without a doubt. Right. So all of that comes into play, not just for Saquon, for other other players in similar circumstances. I think if you want to have the conversation, it's not Daniel Jones versus Saquon. It was what you were alluding to, whereas when you got to the point, who were you going to tag and who were you going to maybe try to lock up long term? That's the debate. But once again, it takes two to tango. If Saquon doesn't want to take the long-term deal, then what are you going to do under those circumstances? You're probably going to then say to yourself, all right, well, we want to keep him for a year, but we can't give him the long-term deal. So you tag him and then you try to work the longer deal out with the other position who you want to retain. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. But, they tried to your point, they tried to give themselves a situation where both players would be in the mix. But at this point, it's water under the bridge. And I think at least the way Giants fans should look at it as Saquon, if he stayed with the Giants, there was only limited impact that he was truly going to have in this environment and under these circumstances. So I understand it's not fun watching a division rival get to a Super Bowl and maybe win. It's not fun seeing a former player in Big Blue be at the center of that. But I think you need to be realistic. You need to say to yourself, if we go down the hypothetical road where Saquon would have stayed with the Giants, does he have these 60-yard runs consistently? Is he having a career year? It's highly unlikely that was going to come to fruition because the pieces are just not in place compared to Philadelphia.
This is the same question I ask all the time. Lance, if you just insert Saquon Barkley onto the Giants roster last year, everyone else is the same. How many games did the Giants win? How many more games did they win?
Well, based on the track record of previous years,
2?
Maybe. In that ballpark.
Okay, great.
2-3 we're talking about.
Right.
Max.
That's
it.
Is that moving the needle?
No, not at all. It's not going to put you as an organization
Correct.
in any better of an attractive position. So I think that's how you have to look at it.
You could even argue that, well, then you'd be picking 9th in the draft or 10th in the draft, and you wouldn't have an opportunity to pick a quarterback.
Because of the extra wins or so that
Correct.
came down the road, or because of a significant splash play by Saquon Barkley, or whatever it may be.
And again, that doesn't make it any easier. That doesn't mean that all the really big Saquon Barkley fans out there are not going to be upset. I get why you are. And he was a great player. He was a really good Giant. Like, no one's arguing that.
And he was homegrown, too. I think that's the other part of it. And I understand that. We always talk about it on this show. You always want to have a reason to give the players you draft second contracts. But when new general managers come in, it changes things. And this is the other thing, and I understand we're revisiting a conversation that's been beaten like a dead horse.
Yeah, so let's not beat it much longer.
No, but the only other thing that I do want to add is the fact that you were talking about position value. Joe Shane also came from an organization in Buffalo where they did not pay heavy bucks for running backs. The Devin Singletaries, the Zach Mosses. They figured, okay, it's a complimentary piece. Now, in no way...
Cook was he a day 3 pick?
Yeah, James Cook is another one. So that's how he learned from the franchise in terms of their approach. And, let's not be naive. You learn from your previous stops and you bring that philosophy over with you. Now, in no way am I saying that those guys are equivalent to Saquon Barkley and his upside, but it goes back to, if you believe in just the running back position and you don't equate it to offensive weapon and have all of these other delegations that we're talking about, then I understand why those decisions were made.
All right, let's go to Hugo in New Jersey. Hugo, what's going on?
Hey guys, I'm kind of coming up for air after like a major top secret project, but catching up with the team.
CIA or FBI contracting you? Is that what's going on here? Boy, that was some response.
I saved the Republic. Let's just put it.
You did what? I didn't catch that, Hugo. What'd you say?
No. I'm just kidding.
Are you part of Doge, Hugo?
So here's the thing. I'm trying to catch up on the Giants, and the way I see it, I think a lot of energy's been spent on the quarterback position. But the way I see it is this draft is pretty weak when it comes to quarterbacks, and there's really no good options in free agency. In other words, nothing the Giants will do in the quarterback position will make a significant difference in wins in the coming year.
Well, Hugh, I will put it this way. There is no easy answer at quarterback this year. Last year, a wide receiver, for example, there was an easy answer, right? All right, you drafted Dunze, you draft Neighbors, or you draft Harrison. Easy answer at wide receiver. There is nothing like that staring you in the face this year.
So listen, if you are a reader of Dante's Inferno, we're about in the deepest chamber of quarterback hell.
So
That's where we are. So let's stop.
Okay, so
spending time on
basically,
that.
I want to paint the picture here. So basically, you're like half your body is frozen in ice on like the 8th level right now. Is basically where you are. Is what you're telling me.
I'm with all the traders, Judas.
Yes.
And the rest.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
That's where the
Yes.
that's where
You're
the
in the ice
Giants
block.
are. Let's be realistic about where the Giants are. So the one thing you can do draft wise is improve the rest of the team. And I'm a Abdul Carter guy. I really don't like the body type of Travis Hunter. And so I'm an Abdul Carter guy. If Abdul Carter falls to the Giants at 3, just take Abdul Carter. Okay. So let's talk about, like, the Giants have to think about themselves as competing with the rest of the league, not compared to where they were. So, in other words,
well, Hugo, I would say not even the rest of the league. Hugo, real quick, Hugo, real fast. I would just say not even the rest of the league. Why don't you just compete with the division? Because that's the first thing you got to do, right?
Well, here's what I'm getting at. Okay, we're in better cap position than we were 3 years ago.
Sure.
Right? But we have a bottom 5 roster, but a middle of the league level of cap space. That's really not a good place to be. And by the way, Daniel Jones, everyone poo-poos the contract. He's the 4th highest paid player on the team, and he's not even on the team. That's not a good thing. That's actually a terrible thing.
Well, that's what happens when you part ways with players and there's dead money.
The Washington Commanders, who have now a franchise quarterback and started rebuilding their team through mid-tier free agents, have way more financial flexibility.
Yeah,
than
we
the
know
Giants.
that. Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so that's not any good. And when I think of the Giants, right, I don't get Joe Shane. He's like, we're close, and then the owner says, I'm not sure we're any better than we were 3 years ago. And then the last thing I heard him say was, oh, the cupboard's not empty on offense. Well, really, you scored 14 points per game on offense. Like,
yeah, but Hugo, you know realistically how much that has to do with the quarterback
position. You have
position,
a wide receiver and a left tackle. That's all. So if I think about the Giants as a playoff team, right, what would it look like? You need 2 quarterbacks, a starter and a backup. You need 3 defensive tackles. You need 2 guys to start next to Dexter and a rotational piece. You need a cornerback 1. You need a safety 2. You need a wide receiver 2. You need a guard 1. You need a swing tackle. I mean, I can go on and on. I mean, our friend Len says we're a year away from being a year away. To me, it feels like we're 2 years away from being a year away. I mean, this is a disaster. Let's be honest.
But Hugo, I mean, that regardless of what you just laid out, I mean, you still need to find a quarterback. So I still go back to
you need to roll someone out there, but they're not going to be a difference maker. They're just going to be a game manager.
Well, I mean, that could be disputed. The bottom line is if they find that there's somebody in the draft that they can develop and is worthy of the 3rd overall pick, you take that quarterback because there's
no one in this draft. I've watched these quarterbacks.
But that's what you think, Hugo. But in fairness, somebody in the front office may beg to differ. And that's what a lot of teams do.
Ward, I don't know what he can do under pressure. And then the rest, you guys know the stats. Quarterbacks taken after the top 10 bust. So, and this team is deficient across that. That's why the whole concept of let's just throw darts at it. No, there's opportunity cost to throwing darts at it, and then the team just stinks forever.
Well, I mean,
no, Hugo. The easiest way for the team to stink forever is to never find the quarterback. That's the easiest way for a team to stink forever.
Well, I got to say, like, in this free agency and this draft, it's not a time to take.
Oh, no, Hugo, Hugo, your point that this might not be the year where you find that guy long term, that could be absolutely be correct. I don't think that's necessarily wrong.
Let's not throw darts for the sake of throwing darts. That's like an idiotic concept.
Well, but I mean, listen, Hugo, we'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. I don't think it's throwing darts, though, John. I completely disagree with his assessment. If you have the third overall pick,
you're taking measured risks.
Yes,
is what you're doing.
You're high enough where you're taking a calculated risk. Is how best I would describe it, where you're doing your homework, you know realistically who's in the ballpark of where you're taking them, and there would be a plan in place, especially if you bring in a veteran quarterback and saying, hey, we're not going to start this guy immediately. I mean, look at Bryce Young. Bryce Young was taken number 1 overall. Was Carolina, to use Hugo's breakdown, did Bryce Young walk into a lovely situation where the house was in order and they had...
No, it was the opposite.
Nose tackle ready and the running backs and every other position that he went through? No, not at all. And
you could even remember how bad the Texans roster looked before C.J. Stroud showed up?
Sure. And this season wasn't great for C.J. Stroud in comparison to year 1. That's why, I mean, listen, I think Jaden Daniels is great, but to crown him already after 1 year, can we slow down a little bit? I mean, in the NFL, you've got to do it over and over again. I'm not taking anything away from Jaden. I really like what I see, but I love it how people after one season say, oh, this team found the franchise guy. Well, they said the same thing about C.J. Stroud, and I thought C.J. Stroud took a bit of a step back this season.
He did.
Doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback, but you got to relax a little.
Progression
after one,
isn't linear.
Yeah.
Correct.
So, but returning to Bryce Young, Carolina could have said, oh, we can't bring in a quarterback, John, because everything's miserable around it. No, you have the number 1 overall pick. If you like the guy, you bring him in. The NFL doesn't work where everything is ideal. Then you get the pick you want to take the quarterback. That's not how you build a franchise.
This is how I look at it, all right? If you head into this draft, you have the 3rd overall pick, and I don't know what the Giants think of these quarterbacks. If you don't have a first-round grade on one of these quarterbacks, you don't pick 1 of 3, okay? You don't. But what if you have Cam Ward as the 10th best player on your board? Right?
Then I think because of his position value, that moves him up.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? And then I think it's probably worth taking a player that's lower graded because it's such an important position that if you hit on it, it means so much for you, which is why I focus on the high-end traits, right? That's why I lean more towards Cam Ward. I think he has more arm talent than Shedeur Sanders. I think he's probably a little bit more mobile than Shedeur and things like that. Now, maybe the Giants value Shedeur Sanders' experience, toughness, accuracy in the pocket, the way he's able to handle adversity. Maybe that's more important. He's going to be graded higher for the Giants. I don't know how they view those 2 quarterbacks, or the other ones in the class for that matter. So, yes, is there an opportunity cost to picking a quarterback that doesn't work out? Yes, but you weigh that opportunity cost. I don't know why I said that like I'm from South Jersey. Wow. Jeez. Versus... That was bad. Versus how...
You want to work on North Jersey next?
My goodness, that was not good at all.
It's the cost of coffee.
Yeah, exactly. So you weigh that opportunity cost of selecting a player that's not a quarterback versus the benefit of hitting on a quarterback. And you find what your happy medium is in between, right? That's why last year, if those top 3 guys were gone, I thought Malik Neighbors was so good, or Roma Dunze or Joe Alt, whichever guy you were going to pick in that spot, was so much of a better player to me than J.J. McCarthy that I wasn't willing to pick McCarthy at 6 because I thought those other guys were that much better. But this year, is Abdul Carter that much better than Cam Ward to make up for the position value difference? I'm not sure, right? That's tighter to me. That's closer. I'm not done my evaluation process. I can't tell you for sure. But I do see a realistic path where I think Cam Ward could develop into a legitimate quarterback, number 1, that could be a top 10 quarterback. I'm not sure I saw that for J.J. McCarthy last year, to be honest with you, which is why I was more hesitant. So, and again, I haven't finished my Ward evaluation yet. I'll get there. But that's what you're always weighing. And no, it's not randomly saying, oh, I think this quarterback stinks, but I'm going to pick one for the sake of picking one. No.
I mean,
you weigh how much you think of the player versus... what you think his upside is based on his high-end talent, because that's what you're looking for a quarterback. I'm not interested in drafting the 17th best quarterback. I'm not interested. You're not going to win anything, right? The 17th best quarterback in the league might get you into the playoffs. They might get you to 10 wins. You're not winning anything significant with that player. You're just not. So are you picking a quarterback that you realistically see with some level of development based on their baseline talent and physical traits can become a championship quarterback? If you think that guy has the chance to become that with the right development, then you pick him. If you don't, then you probably pass on him. That's how I look at it.
Well, and what I would add is, and I think this is what you were getting at, is there's more leeway, at least even through the Giants' lens, of even if the quarterback is not the third-ranked player on your board, but because of the fact that you need a quarterback, and if he's still a top 10, top 12 player based on your rankings, it's worth having him leapfrog the other guys on your board because the other players may not have as significant of an impact. Right. Forget just in year one. I'm talking about big picture, long term. Now, Cam Ward, I've said this multiple times on this program, Cam has multiple years of starting experience, which is extremely attractive.
5 years.
Okay, and we know that pedigree bodes well.
Yep.
I also brought up the fact that because I was watching Miami closer than most teams this past season because there were a lot of interesting developments during their schedule, they had a dismal defense, John. I mean, he had to bring them back in games, and that's also good to know. That, he didn't have a top 10 defense that he turned to and they closed the door, and then he's just handing the ball off for the entirety of the fourth quarter. That was not happening.
And again, I think he could still be a very good quarterback. That was J.J. McCarthy the previous year for Michigan.
Because of the game flow and so forth. Exactly. So Cam is much different in terms of the environment. There's the athleticism. So there are attractive pieces there. Now, Cam Ward and Sanders could be off the board by the time the Giants get to 3.
Absolutely.
Now, does that change the conversation? I am never campaigning for you take a quarterback for the sake of a quarterback. There's got to be conviction in the room. I've always said that. I still stand by that. Yes. But I also am not naive, and I look at where the Giants are and the necessity of that position. But if Sanders and Ward are off the board, and the Giants evaluated all the quarterbacks, and we're talking about there's a nosedive after those first 2, then no, you should not say, well, we got the 3rd overall pick. We have this guy ranked as a bottom first rounder, high second rounder. No, because, I mean, that's front office suicide, for the lack of a better phrase. I mean, you're just basically saying, well, in order to keep our head above water, we need a quarterback, so we're going to really roll the dice. No, you're not helping your cause. You might as well wait for the 2nd or the 3rd round to take a flyer on a quarterback.
That's correct.
Under those circumstances.
I'm with you on that. All right, we're in agreement. All right, let's go Jeff in Maine. He wants to talk about the quarterback, too. Jeff, what's happening?
Oh, hey, guys. So I'd like to talk about why I think Jameis Winston would be the perfect bridge quarterback to sign. So we need to score more points. We need more big plays in order to score more points. You won't complete any long pass plays if you don't at least try. And the interception issue might be mitigated by the fact that a receiver like Malik Neighbors will get more 50-50 balls than an average receiver.
Jeff, hold on. When Jameis Winston was in Tampa Bay, he had Mike Evans, who might be the best contested catch receiver in all of football. Was his interception issues mitigated in Tampa Bay?
True.
He had a 30 for 30 documentary that season. Well, hold on, and I don't mean to cut you off. What about who he worked with in Cleveland this past season? I mean, let's not make it sound like they were a bunch of nobodies. Right. No, I mean, Jerry Jeudy was making contested catches in the second half of the season.
Jeff, look.
David Njoku?
If this was 3 years ago and you were thinking maybe you could fix Jameis after his first stop, we've had too many stops here where he just does the same thing over and over again. He is what he is at this point. If you want to bring him in and take that volatility and hope you hit a hot streak where he just doesn't happen to turn it over for a few games, I get that. And if that's your strategy, it's fine. But at this point, you have to accept Jameis Winston for what he is. A guy that's going to make some big plays, to your point, but a guy that's also going to kill you. Will you score more points? Yes. Will you turn the ball over more? Yes. And that usually is what prevents you from winning football games.
Jeff, let me ask you this before, we let you continue. If you put yourself in the shoes of Kevin Stefanski, okay, this to me best spells out Jameis Winston's situation. You had a roster, okay, after Deshaun Watson got hurt, and that was a mess to begin with. You had Dorian Thompson-Robinson to choose from and Bailey Zappi. Now, if I give you those 3 quarterbacks, I would say Jameis Winston is by far the most appealing, right, has the most experience, probably has the better arm. Yet Kevin Stefanski said, I'm not riding it out again with Jameis Winston, and I'm going to go with those 2 other options. If that doesn't tell you all you need to know about Jameis Winston, I don't know what else we need to add to this conversation.
And he is not the first GM that's made that decision either, by the way.
Well, coach, in terms of Stefanski,
correct.
we're talking
in terms
about.
of Stefanski, sorry.
Andrew Berry,
Well,
if you'd like to continue.
Yeah, I mean,
breakdown.
I don't know that Mike Evans is, I'm a great receiver, but if he's a better 50-50 receiver than Malik Neighbors, you could be right. But I got a couple other points.
No Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer. So.
Jeff,
Jeff,
go ahead, Jeff.
I don't think there's a debate there, but anyway, yeah.
Finish up.
Let's say it's 3rd and long, and you throw a long bomb, and it gets intercepted. Okay, that's not that much worse than a punt, all right?
I disagree.
Also,
it's a lost possession. It's a lost possession, Jeff.
Well, no. He said on a 3rd and long. So if it's
Right.
basically he wants to heave it up on like a 3rd and 18 or something like that.
Well, and then what happens if the guy returns it?
That's the
What
right
about
answer.
that? You taking that into consideration?
What happens if they return a punt, too? But also, you still got Jalen Hyatt on the team, and we don't even know – we still have to evaluate him. So to evaluate him, you're going to have to throw some long passes and also to help develop him.
Hey, Jeff, look, I will say this. Jeff, I will say this on the Jameis front, and appreciate the call. I would prefer Jameis to someone like the Patriots quarterback this year. The name's on the tip of my tongue. He was Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah,
thank
Jacoby
you.
Brissett.
I take him over a guy like
I didn't know
Brissett.
which Patriot quarterback
Sorry,
we were talking about.
I'll take him over a guy like Brissett. I'll take him over a guy like Marcus Mariota. But I get the excitement and he's fun and all this stuff and that's great. I've just seen the same play too many times, right? It always goes the same way, and I just don't have any confidence that it's going to change.
Well, and the last comment that the last caller made, I can assure you, something tells me Joe Shane in the front office is not sitting around the room and saying, man, we got to bring in a quarterback to evaluate Jalen Hyatt this season, because if we don't, we're in trouble.
They're looking to win games.
Yeah.
And you don't win games by turning the ball over.
Well, and you don't win games by prioritizing one wide receiver on the roster to evaluate. Right. And if you don't think that other quarterbacks you could bring in have enough arm strength to get the ball to Jalen Hyatt, then you're really in trouble. And something tells me there's somebody else out there in a free agent market that could throw the ball deep enough to get the ball to Hyatt to continue to evaluate.
And have you heard how Brian Dable talked about turning the ball over at the end of the year with his quarterback position? You think he's in favor of that? I would be very, very surprised.
Yeah, something tells me he does not want to sit through another up and down roller coaster throughout the course of a game, because Jameis is like a box of chocolate. Okay, you really don't know what you're gonna get. Okay, you don't. You have dreams of grandeur with him, and he has wow me plays, John. I've watched enough Jameis where you're like, wow, where did that come from? What was it? It was the Monday night game against Denver. Jameis had like the game of a lifetime, and then the following week. Of course, the week I'm not going up against him in fantasy, he has to have the opposite end of the spectrum. So, no, literally, I always get the luck. I go up against Jameis Winston when he throws 500 yards and 5 touchdowns.
So is that what we figured out? It's personal for you.
Oh, it's 100% personal. And it was the Baltimore game this season I played Jameis. I remember that. Because the Browns knocked off the Ravens. And I'm like, where is this? Why couldn't I play, Jameis when Jameis threw 7 interceptions a game? No, I had to get him when he actually got his head straight. So, I digress.
Have you
talked to the topic at hand?
Have you talked to Charlie in Portland, Maine since you've been back?
No, I have not had the pleasure.
Yes, I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Charlie.
Surprised he has struggled this much to get through, actually.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Did you click your Beatle boots 3 times and you found yourself back here?
Well, if this is home, then I certainly was not doing it. I can tell you that. Home is not you on the phone. I can assure you that, Charlie.
Welcome back. Hey, look. Hey, there's a couple things. One thing, Winston, you guys never talk about his stats when he was with New Orleans and he was with Pate.
Sure. And then he got hurt.
Those interceptions.
What don't you think the coach had a big influence on that?
Yeah.
Sean got him to buy in.
If you got a coach that can do it like Peyton did, I think the guy can play. So Dable's the kind of guy like Peyton who hates turnovers. So I think he would probably, rein him in a bit. That's all.
Listen, it's possible, Charlie. It's a fair point, but I will say this. Jameis has worked with a lot of other good coaches outside of Sean. I like Kevin Stefanski. Kevin Stefanski's got a really good track record working with quarterbacks. He was with the Vikings for many years. And look at what he did with Joe Flacco and 5 different guys the previous season. Okay, let's not forget about that. Then Dirk Cutter was with Jameis in Tampa Bay. They were on Hard Knocks. There's that famous scene where Jameis is called into Dirk Cutter's office. He sits him down. He says, Jameis, you don't have to put on the cape this season. We got Mike freaking Evans. We got this guy. We got that guy. All I'm asking you is prioritize where you're putting the football. The other guys will do the heavy lifting. And then what happens? So I understand your point, but to say, oh, well, you give him Brian Dable, and it's nothing against Brian Dable. He's been exposed, Jameis, to other coaches that I've seen enough to say I'm not willing to go down that road again.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And by the way, Charlie, and just so the fans have the numbers, he was 14 touchdowns and 3 picks that year with Sean Payton, but he only completed 59% of his passes.
Hey, that's how he ended up with 14 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions.
And I'm looking this up. I'm looking this up right now, Charlie. I'm just curious because PFF tracks turnover-worthy plays. Because a lot of times that can be variance with luck.
Yep.
I'm just curious. I honestly have not. I've not looked at it, so I'm just curious what PFF had him for that year. Let's see. For that year, he was with the Saints. They had him for 6 turnover-worthy plays over the course of that set, which based on dropbacks, it was still down. So compared to this year, in 347 dropbacks with the Browns this year, he had 18 turnover-worthy plays. For the Saints in 2021, he had 6. So you average that out, he probably had about 2/3 of the ones he had this year. So you're right. That year he was better. No question about it. I will not argue that with you. That's fair.
That's the problem I have, because when everybody talks about Winston, it's always those. They never talk about the Saints.
Now the problem is that the next year he had 7 turnover-worthy plays and only 137 dropbacks. So that was kind of back to old Jameis that year.
Right.
In 2022, was Sean Payton still with the Saints or no? I don't think.
No,
might not have been. He might have been gone by then, right?
Yeah, I believe Dennis Allen took over. I'll look that up. I don't think Sean was with them, but it's possible. Right. The other thing is also. And that's why I'm glad you looked up the turnover-worthy plays.
Yeah, that was Dennis Allen.
It was Dennis Allen. That's what I figured.
Paul doesn't believe in turnover-worthy plays. You know that, don't you?
Who doesn't believe in turnover-worthy plays? I didn't hear you.
He got.
Well, I mean,
okay.
Charlie, Paul doesn't believe in a lot of things that modern technology has wrought.
Wait, hold on a minute. Charlie, so your counter to our conversation right now is leaning on Paul Dottino's thought process?
Yeah,
I mean, this is what you've resorted to while I've been gone?
And use of advanced analytics.
Yeah, I mean,
oh, by the way, Charlie, you'll enjoy tomorrow. So I'll give the folks a preview of tomorrow's show. So tomorrow, I had some of our stats people pull all of the numbers for quarterbacks based on where they were drafted and their playoff games they've appeared in and won and winning percentage and all that.
Sure.
And Paul's going to get demolished tomorrow, so I'm just going to warn people.
He has his own list. Have you seen that list?
Yeah.
Okay.
I told him to bring it in, so we will. So he will throw like Brad Johnson at me from 30 years ago, and I will point out that one undrafted quarterback in the last 20 years has won a playoff game, and we'll see who wins that competition.
Yeah. Right.
Oh.
Well, Paul, he wouldn't have never drafted a quarterback in 20 years, pretty much.
Yeah, and it's funny, Charlie, I'm not sure if you listened to the show 2 days ago, but I tried to push him on and I still couldn't get him to change his mind. I'm like, Paul, in retrospect, won't you just admit that you should have drafted Josh Allen in 2018? He goes, nah, they had Davis Webb, and he just was never given a chance. I'm like, Paul, come on, man. Like, give me a break. He's still arguing for it.
Hey.
Like, Paul, just take the L, dude, okay? Take the L.
Just like Humphrey Bogart, they'll always have Paris, okay? Paul will always have the Davis Webb Eagles game, okay? That he can go back. That's what
he goes. He was good at that game. Like Paul, he scored like 13 points. Well, come on.
And last time I checked, Philadelphia wasn't necessarily going all in that game too. But hey, he'll always have that Eagles game, okay? He'll always have that Eagles game. Yeah.
And then he retires from the Super Bowl win.
Boy.
Hey, look, there was a couple other things. One other thing was, it isn't the point that the Giants let Barkley go. I don't think he should have been on the team. I was glad that he left. The point is that they never got anything for him. They knew they were never going to re-sign that guy again after the tag and all the animosity that was going on. They should have traded him at the deadline, along with McKinney.
Yeah, but Troy, I'll be honest with you. At the deadline, they're going to get a 4th-round compensatory pick for him. I don't think they were going to get much better than that if they traded him at that last deadline.
Why? I mean, my God, that's
Because
the thing.
he's a running back
No,
heading
they
into
would've
free
got-
agency.
Somebody would have wanted Barkley. They would have given a 3 or a 2 for that kid.
There's no way
That's
you're
what
getting Charlie heading into a contract year. There was no planning on which you're getting a second-round pick. If they could have gotten a second-round pick for him, they would have made the trade.
You're running the risk when you acquire a player on an expiring contract, to John's point, Charlie. What you have to understand is you have to weigh what are the chances we re-sign him. You may wind up renting him for the second half of the season. Why would you give up a second-round pick for a player
Because
that's
you know
not
you're gonna
guaranteed to
re-sign
come?
him.
No, you
That's
but you
why.
don't. You don't know though if that's going to come to fruition. That's my point, Charlie. You may have
No,
hope.
you know how much money he wants. You have a great idea of what he wants.
Well, no. So
and you
what you're
wouldn't go
saying
out
is,
and trade
But
for him
Saquon would
if
have
you
to go
didn't
there
think you
too.
could
But
re-sign
Saquon
him.
would want to have to go there too. You know what I mean? Like, for example, the Eagles
I know,
never would
I
have
know.
traded a second-round pick for a running back. Not in a million
Well,
years.
That's
the
what you
only
gotta
way,
say.
Charlie, the only
That's
way I'm
what
giving up a
James thought.
second-round pick.
Nobody wants him. Nobody would ever trade for him. He ain't going to Philly. What happened? That's
Yeah,
all
but
I'm
that
saying.
was
They
a
should have got
financial
something for him.
commitment. But, well, Charlie, like I said, they're getting a fourth-round compensatory pick for him this offseason, or at least more likely than not.
The only way
All right.
that I would give up a second-round pick for Barkley under those circumstances if the deal is consummated before the trade, meaning the parameters of a contract
it
are
would
in
have to
place.
be, that's
No,
right.
but there's no guarantee, Charlie,
That
in your
happens a lot.
hypothetical that
That happens a lot.
happens. That's the point.
All right, and then, Charlie, you had a point about Eli you want to make before we say goodbye here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think Eli's going to get in tonight. Listening to Peyton in an interview.
It certainly did not
and-
sound that way, Charlie. I agree with you.
Yeah, it doesn't sound that way. But the thing is, isn't it 70% of the votes and you get in? Isn't
I think it's up to 80 this year, right? Didn't it go up to
is it
80%
80?
threshold?
May have
I
gone
think.
up. Let's
I think it's an 80% threshold this year.
Oh, that's why. I was going to say, how is he not going to get 70%? Okay, well, I think he should be first ballot, but I just hope he gets in next year. But it's going to be tougher. There's going to be more quarterbacks. It might not be for 2 more years before he gets in, which is going to be pretty sad.
Well, and you may have to prepare for even longer. I just looked up. It's at least 80% approval of the committee. I mean, remember,
So basically, there's 7 players left, and everyone on the committee gets 5 votes to vote for 5 of the 7, and you have to get above 80% in order to get into the hall.
yeah, it's
That's
a very
basically how
high
that
standard.
works. Yes.
Yeah.
And it should be a high standard, by the way.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
No, but what I was going to say is...
And thank you for the call, Charlie. We appreciate it.
Well, one of us does. But anyway, we'll continue.
I felt you had a lot of fun with Charlie on that.
Oh, I mean, it's a ball of fun. I mean, are you kidding me? The highlight of my day, John. Thank you so much. It really warmed my heart.
Anyway, and by the way,
yeah.
I was going to do some Eli stuff today, but we're going to know tonight, so I didn't want to, kind of think and guess and all that stuff about it. And I've said this to you guys on the show before. I did not, based on the Hall of Fame voters I've spoken to. I mean, we've had Bob Glauber on our shows. We had Mike Sando on the Giants Huddle a couple times. We talked to Mike about this, and they thought it was going to be a really tough debate because of the regular season record and the inconsistency. Eli only actually made the playoffs 5 different times, was it? But never a top 3 in MVP voting. I think he was an first team he was all pro team member just once or twice. So a lot of those types of accolades, they're not there like you might have for some of the other guys that are first team.
He was actually never all pro, by the way, 4-time Pro Bowler.
I thought
but never all pro.
2011 he was an all pro.
I
No,
don't
okay.
see
No, you might be right
anything
about
all
that.
pro on the list.
So
yeah.
and that's my point, right? Very rarely was he top 3, top 4 MVP votes, that sort of thing. So it gets tough. And I understand why there's some debate. I think he should go in because of the performance that he had through the playoffs, his longevity, his overall numbers, his performance in those playoff runs. But I understand the argument against it, too, to be totally honest with you. So I thought it would be a tough run for him first ballot. I think he will eventually get in. Luckily, guys, Eli's very chill. He does not care about this stuff. He'll get in at some point. He'll be fine. We'll see if he gets in or not. They've done a great job of keeping it secret. Nothing is leaked out. They really put the clamps down on the Hall of Fame voters. Usually I talked to a couple of them, and they're like, yeah, we can't. We don't know anything. Yeah. We can't say anything. So I just think that's where we are, and I think he will eventually get in. I just don't think it's going to be on the first ballot. I hope I'm wrong. I think I should be wrong, but that's what my opinion. That's what my prediction is of what's going to happen.
Antonio Gates was, to me, a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he didn't even get in last year. So, when I see things like that, John, it's hard to argue Eli under those circumstances when Gates a lot more accomplished. I know it's 2 different positions. And, I look at Kurt Warner, which to me spells out perfectly what you were talking about. Kurt may have not had the longevity of Eli, but Kurt had more substance in the regular season.
He had more dominant regular
Correct.
season years.
We're talking about 2 MVP awards.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about he led the NFL in completion percentage 3 times, passer rating twice, passing yards once, passing touchdowns twice. That's a lot. That's a lot on the bone compared to Eli. And
I think body of work, Eli's a little bit more deserving, but I understand where you're coming from.
And the durability, probably he doesn't get enough credit for. But I will say this. I think when you're looking at the Hall of Fame, 2 really remarkable postseason runs does not make up for an entire career on an island. I think you got to look at the whole capacity.
Which is why I don't think he was a
can't
shoo-in
just
as
look
a
at
first ballot.
everything. And that's how I always felt.
Right.
So that's why I think it may take some time.
I do think eventually he does deserve to go in, though, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, look, what bodes well for him is pretty much everybody with 2 Super Bowl victories has gotten in, but there is a guy by the name of Jim Plunkett. Okay, so we can't forget
But Jim
about
Plunkett has nowhere near the regular season accolades
that's
and
fair.
total yards and stuff that he.
But I guess when people throw that out, I do bring up Plunkett,
Yes.
and Plunkett was a Super Bowl MVP once. So you take that into consideration. There is that little caveat there that you can't just breeze by.
Yeah, so we'll know tonight NFL honors. We'll talk about that with Paul tomorrow. We'll also have our quarterback conversation tomorrow. I'm killing Pearson, I know, but real quick, Super Bowl on Sunday. I know you got to eat lunch, Pearson. I know, I'm killing you.
I got to eat too, Pearson. So
Super Bowl on
misery
Sunday.
likes company.
What are your thoughts?
I like the Chiefs over the Eagles. It's hard at this stage to bet against Kansas City. They continue to find a way, and I think that the days of thinking, oh, well, this is going to be the game they're going to turn the ball over 100 times. Patrick Mahomes, by the way,
no, he does not.
13 touchdowns, no interceptions in the last 8 games. You know he's not thrown a pick since November against the Bills in the regular season?
I know.
And they did have the fumble the last game. Methodically, they go up and down the field. He's got Hollywood Brown back. You got Xavier Worthy. You got Kelsey. I would say they're more dangerous now than they were the last time Patrick threw an interception.
The Chiefs are almost experimenting the regular season at this point. And now they just turn on the postseason. I'm with you. And me and Paul get on this more tomorrow, I guess. But to me, I know Steve Spagnuolo, he's not going to let Saquon Barkley beat him. And I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to be able to outplay Patrick Mahomes. And that's kind of where I'm landing here. I have all the respect and more for the Eagles defense. I think it's really good. But I think the Mahomes factor is going to be the difference here.
Well, I think the Eagles need a high volume of explosive plays. And even if Saquon gives them 1 or 2, to me, I think the onus is more on Jalen Hurts in the passing attack.
With you.
And if that doesn't measure up to what the Chiefs are doing, even if the Chiefs go 10 plays, 11 plays, you have to be able to score quickly if you're going up against Kansas City to keep pace with them. And I think the Eagles and the Chiefs, I think they'll be able to score. I just don't know if Philly will be able to do it as consistently.
Yeah, and I just think Hurts struggles versus the blitz still a little bit, and who's better at creative blitzes?
He'll bring guys
Steve
from the
Spagnuolo.
secondary,
Exactly. And I think
every which way.
And I think that's going to give Hurts, unless, maybe A.J. Brown catches 2 deep passes to kill the blitz, and that's how the Eagles win. That's very possible. That to me is the way. But again, we'll talk about it more tomorrow. Lance, this was a pleasure, my man.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll talk to you next time, everybody. Lance will be back with you next week. I'm off next week, but I'll be with Paul tomorrow on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. We'll see you tomorrow at 12:30.